WLHSTV Politics sat down with County Board Member Matt DeFerranti to discuss his important role as a County Board Member, his plans going forward after his re-election earlier this month, and to learn more about who he is as a person.
So could you just introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure, I'm Matt DeFerranti, Arlington County Board Member.
So how are you feeling about your re-election earlier this month?
I'm honored to get the chance to serve again. The trust that Arlington residents have put in me for the next 4 years is something I don't take for granted. And so I'm excited about the work ahead and thrilled to have the chance.
What is the missing middle and what is your position on it?
Sure, missing middle is a term that you could either interpret to mean, if you just hear the term, you could interpret it to mean middle class economically, or you could interpret it as a type of housing. And so that type of housing could include duplexes and townhomes, types of homes and apartments that are between really tall buildings in the transportation corridors and single-family homes. And when I talk about missing middle, that's what I'm referring to. Also, that is what the county means by the phrase missing middle. You asked if I support it. The details for me are really important. I am supportive of additional housing supply so that more people can have the opportunity to live here, and not just those at the very top economically. But what you mean by missing middle is really important to me. I don't support 8-plexes and 7-plexes, but I do support allowing in the same size home, same height, same yard and setbacks, duplexes, triplexes, and on larger lots, quadplexes, as well as on some lots, 6-plexes. I'm supportive of that because I want it to be possible for you and your classmates to be able to live here one day. And I think if we do nothing, then it will be very hard for anybody but the very wealthy or those of us who already own a home to be able to live here. So that's why I'm supportive of thoughtful missing middle policies.
Why was missing middle such a big issue this election season?
Well, I think it's very personal to everyone. Next to school boundaries, I think people's homes are a large part of their wealth, their economic well-being. And so it's very personal to people who own homes. It's also really personal to renters who might be in their 20s and 30s and might want to one day live here long term, but don't think that they can afford to do that. And so that's why I think it's so personal, and that's why it played out to a significant extent in the election. I will say that there's a lot to this past election besides missing middle, and I think that interpreting the election as a referendum only on missing middle is not the right way to think of it. There were 3 of us who were running. We each had different ideas, and I think that Arlington voters are pretty well informed, and I like to think they made a decision based on more information than just missing middle.
So besides the issues relating to the missing middle, what do you plan to do new or continue to do for Arlington?
Sure. So I have similar priorities, but they have to adapt to the new reality. So one way in which they have to adapt is schools in terms of the funding. We don't make decisions with respect to the inside of what happens at W&L or any school, but we do provide the funding. And today we have a much nationwide, and even in Virginia as a whole, we have a teacher shortage in Virginia. Now, Arlington has been able to provide a raise for teachers, but it's different today. Teaching is a different profession, and there's different concerns. It's hard to be a teacher. I've been a teacher, and I know it's very difficult. So one is investing in our schools. And I think we need to be mindful that investing in our schools might mean something different today than 4 years ago when we had a lot of schools that were really full physically. We still have full buildings, but we also have to invest in the people that make our schools good. So there's other priorities, like climate change is a huge priority of mine. We had a 2025 goal that we're on track to hit. So the idea is that we should have in our buildings and across our whole community, by 2035, we should get to 100% renewable electricity. In order to get to that goal, we have to set goals that are for 2030 in addition to the 2025 goal that we're going to hit. So those are pieces that I'm working on. I also think that a priority that we have to keep in mind as we approach 2+ years, maybe closer to halfway between two and 3 years towards the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, we have to make racial justice and equity a continued priority, and we can't lessen our focus on that just because days have passed since George Floyd's murder.
So what is your role as a county board member?
So we're essentially the legislative body. We set policy, work on budgets, and we are the legislative way in which Arlington gets the community as a whole is represented. And so that means we have authority over the budget, which means how much to put into schools for affordable housing, how much to put into fixing our streets and how to fix our streets at a policy level. And so that's all budget related. We also have responsibility for things like zoning policy and how Ballston and Roslyn and Clarendon, as well as Columbia Pike, how those main streets get developed, as well as parks. There's a whole bunch that is involved, and it keeps you on your toes.
How did you get involved in local politics?
I actually had interests. I had been a teacher through Teach for America, which is a program that places teachers in primarily under-resourced and low-income schools. And so I cared about education, and I ended up, after I moved here, I lived in D.C. I grew up in McLean, lived in D.C. before moving here. And when I moved here, I got involved through the school budget committee because it was interesting to me to think about how we can most effectively and efficiently spend our resources that we have for our schools. So I was on the chair of the school budget committee, and I was on the housing commission. I kind of just followed my interests, and I think that's the more you work in an area that you think you like, the more you learn whether you actually are interested in that or not. And I think that's really important to remember because I meet so many people who I was a lawyer, and I meet so many people who want to become a lawyer. I don't meet as many lawyers who love what they're doing every day. And so I got involved basically by following my interests through housing and schools. And then I also met a number of people that are involved directly in the political, local Democratic Party.
Do you think you might like to run for a state or maybe even federal position someday?
I don't rule it out, but I don't think it's very likely. I'm going to do this job probably. I can't envision how I wouldn't do this job for the next 4 years. To be concrete, I'm not interested in being in Don Byer's job ever because he has to run every 2 years, and all the rest of his time, or a lot of the rest of his time, is spent raising money, and that's like, for me, that's like not as fun, and it sort of makes me think of the exhaustion that at times I felt, or the boredom at times I felt when I was an attorney. So I don't think I'd ever do that one. And other jobs, I think it's really important to want to do the job that you're looking for, not just to want to run for something because it's next or because it's exciting. I love doing this job. I'm nerdy enough, and I care enough to engage a lot directly with residents. So that's what I'm focused on.
Do you have a favorite restaurant in Arlington, and what's your favorite thing to get there?
Oh, well, I do. It's both, it's convenient and it's close, There's on just near Langston Boulevard, near the Lehigh Shopping Center, there's Cafe Colleen, which is, they have steak frites, which my wife and I love to get. And so that is our favorite at the moment, but we were over the weekend, we were at Sayre Restaurant, and I'm always suggesting to my wife that anytime we ever go out to eat, it's in Arlington. So,
Do you have any advice for Washington Liberty students?
Oh, I think, I guess two thoughts. One is, if you're at Washington and Liberty now, then you've lived through the pandemic, which meant time away from your friends at, in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grades. And that's thinking back to when I was in high school and when I went to Longfellow Intermediate School, which is just over the line in Fairfax County. It would have crushed me to not be able to spend time with friends. I think that there's a ton of mental health issues for some and anxieties that are part of growing up for others. And so I would say don't ever feel you're totally alone, and it'll get better. I found that 7th and 8th grade and even 9th grade was very hard for me. And that doesn't mean that senior year in high school was perfect. So hang in there with the challenges that you're dealing with, and know that you're not alone in going through times where you're not sure as to what you want to do next. So that's one message. And then the other thing is follow your heart. Think of the things that you enjoy spending time doing that are sustainable, and do them. And that may mean playing baseball. One class that I came to at WNL, there was one student who baseball was his thing, or it could be music, or it could be art. I listened to the choir at the opening of the Annex building a little while ago. So, and if that's your thing, then do it. And also academically, follow what you want to be doing. And I think it's really important to do that. And I think we've all learned how precious life is, even at WNL over the last 2 weeks with Braylon's passing.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Some information to think about and some great advice from Matt DeFerranti. Keep watching GTV Politics every Wednesday for more interviews with local politicians.
Audio Jungle.